Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and today I have the opportunity to work on a Shimano. It's the Caenan 100 series 7-ball bearings. It belongs to Lyle. Lyle sent this reel in, and I understand he had it apart to clean and service it, put it back together again, and well, it's just not running the way it should. So he had asked me if I can't see if I can't help him out. A couple of quick tests before you get started too much. Is the free spool release working? Well, if the spool is turning and it trips back, so there's something going on in the gear side case. It actually feels like broken line, but if he's had it apart, it probably isn't that. He's also sent me the little spring mechanism. And usually with this little, I call it the rocket spring, there's a little stud on the one side, there's a spring on the other. Usually when you see that with a Shimano reel, you think that it's inside the star adjuster, but I decided I'm going to go pull the schematic. You can get it in 2 flavors with all the parts numbers, and then I just did a cut and paste on the other one, and it turns out that that spring assembly belongs under the top washer here, so we'll at least know where to install that. The rest of it kind of looks like a basic Shimano reel, and well, we're going to take it apart. We'll show you how to service it and how to keep it fishing, or hopefully get it back to where it was so that it can go fishing again. I don't know this reel, haven't worked on it, but from a schematic standpoint it looks like most of the Shimanos do, and we're going to start by taking off the exterior pieces and parts. As we do that, I want to encourage you to subscribe to my channel. Second Chance Tackle is dedicated to the idea of keeping reels serviced and functioning properly, and it's also dedicated to you, showing you how to service your reel so that you don't have to worry about landing a fish and having it well, break off or have the reel seize up or cause you other issues that would lead to the failure of the reel. Okay, well, this is where the piece goes. You'll see the little dimples inside here. Those dimples actually belong down, and this little cavity here, according to the schematic, is where that spring and that little noisemaker go. And then as they bump these little dimples here, that will make the noise to let you know that it's being let out. That's probably the last part we have to put on. Well, while I do this, I just want to make sure that, well, it goes back the way it came. So I'm just checking against the schematic. Here's another issue with this. This nut is on upside down. There's going to be a cavity here in this nut to hold that spring, and it's facing the wrong way. And it wouldn't surprise me if that's the issue right there. And we're going to just test this. Oh, we still got a rough runner there. But you're going to see that there's a groove cut in this that happens to match the spring, and that faces up, not down, as was installed in this reel. So that's kind of leads me to one of the suggestions that I almost always make. It's take pictures along the way as you work on your reels. Make sure that you know what you're doing there, and that you have backup to that just in case. All right, I'm going to remove this side plate here. We currently have that, it's kind of stuck in there. I'll swing that off to the side. I'm going to pull this spool out. The spool was running fine. I just wanted to check. Whenever I do these, I always like to remove that spool to make sure that there are no screws in here that need to be removed in order to remove the other side plate. Now, of course, you can tell that on the schematic here, but I just wanted to check. All right. I don't like working on reels with the braid on the spool, but that's a customer decision, or that's your decision if you're working on your own reel. Sometimes that braid just gets trapped, and when it gets trapped, it gets stuck in a side plate and causes a rough piece of work. So we're going to take that spool out, And we still have a rough click, click, click going here. So there's something that was not installed properly on that side. All right, you saw the two tension washers come out of the top. They're curved. They're not flat washers. They have bellies in them that controls the tension of the star adjuster. That's what we're going to be doing here. Okay. Next step then, we want to remove the 3 side plate screws there, and there's usually another one hiding underneath, and that's right there. And as I mentioned, we checked underneath the spool there because sometimes manufacturers put a screw there. When you remove the side plate screws, make sure that you compare the sizes of those screws and the location of those screws. Shimano is one of these manufacturers that just likes to change the size of the screws for the side plate. And sometimes you'll find a longer or a shorter version of one, a thicker or a thinner one. In this case, those 3 are the same. We've got one more below here. And if they're all the same, you don't need to worry about where they're going to go on the reinstall. But if they're not the same, these are the same, then you need to mark where the longer, shorter, etc. goes. When I take my pieces and parts off, they go into a parts tray. I use the corners of a fast food tray to kind of hold sub-assemblies. I recommend that you have a parts strategy regardless of what that strategy is. Some people like to lay the parts out in the order that they took them off, so that you kind of reverse the order to put them back on. Whatever your scheme is, just make sure you follow it and that you know where your pieces and parts are. And again, a schematic or a picture will help with that. We've taken the 4 side plate screws out. This should just come out. And so the next piece is to look at what else might be going on. And I like to just keep going at each rate. So this one now, I think we might have an issue with that anti-reverse dog. All right, I'm going to just take these 2 off here. The springs for your yoke, they just tend to get lost on me. Bring up the main gear. Oh, I guess we're okay there. No, we're not. Okay, so that's making the noise. What you can see here, hopefully you can see here, is that the fork of this anti-reverse dog is laying on top of this click ratchet. So you wouldn't have an anti-reverse, and we'll just pull it off. I'll show you how it's bent up. And we'll show you the way it goes. This needs to go into one side on each of this click ratchet. This one got bent up pretty good, but we should still be able to do it. That's the way it installs. One arm one side, one arm on the other, and unfortunately this one had them both on one side. That was what's making the noise. Well, we just did a Cast King the other day, and somebody said, I don't like Cast Kings, too much plastic. This is exactly the same amount of plastic that a Cast King would have. And the difference is that the one, this is a right-hand drive, the other one's a left, but here you go. You have the plastic gear that drives the worm gear, the plastic gear on the back end of your drive shaft. Then we'll just pull this out too. And the same thing with the Cast King versus the Shimano here. They're both the same in terms of a plastic yoke and a plastic trip lever. All right, I'm going to take a moment here. I'm kind of checking the teeth as I'm putting the grease on. So a couple of things that we saw. We saw that the anti-reverse dog was out of balance. We saw that the drag nut was upside down. Next, you want to find the ramps on the trip lever here. The ramps go towards the trip lever, and so does the slot in the spool, so that'll come back this way. And we tested this. This was working fine. And what I want to do here is I want to use some fishing reel oil just behind the slides there. And well, we can continue on there. This has got a slot in it, a keyed slot. This is rectangular here. We want to do two things. We want to get the slot aligned with the carrier. There's a bearing under there too, so we can throw a little oil in there. You don't need to necessarily take the gear off, particularly when you're trying to do something like this, which is troubleshooting, and Lyle did a pretty good job of cleaning up the reel. All right, onto the top, seat it here, and then you're going to see as you spin the reel, it's going to release. It'll work back against this retention stud. As you go to pull it back now, it's going to seat itself in there. So we're not going to have that noise that we had before. That's a secondary anti-reverse dog. The first one is actually an anti-reverse clutch that sits here on this reel. Okay, let's continue with this then. We have a hard washer, which is next. And we should have one washer, if I'm reading this right. We do. There's one washer in here. I'm going to pull that off. Now these washers by Shimano are get some grease on them, so I'm going to use some fishing reel grease to do just that. Actually, I'm going to use Cal's Universal Drag Grease. I have a gloved hand, which kind of uses it as a tool. I use it to keep the grease off me, but in this case, I'm going to use it to grease it as well. And then there's some, looks like maybe some old grease or just some tarnish on this. I'll make sure that all gets cleaned as well. Take your drag washer and reset that. Check the teeth. Now, these teeth are clean. I think Lyle probably did a pretty good job of cleaning them. But I'm going to grab a bristle brush. I'm going to pull through on that just to make sure if there is anything caught in there that we take care of it. Okay. Well, so far this is pretty much a base standard kind of a Shimano or baitcaster reel for that matter. There's not a lot of anything here that looks rather unusual. Need to pull this up a little bit. Bring the main gear in. Then we have our keyed washer here. And then we want to put the inner sleeve for that anti-reverse. We want to put that onto the main gear, making sure that those two studs seat into there and that there's no gap along the metal part. While I have that, you don't grease or oil that reverse clutch, but you can use a cotton swab to make sure that it's clean, and this one is clean. There's nothing back here in terms of a bearing or that. It's kind of unusual. I'm going to check this side, see if it's sitting here, if there is one. Yeah, there's a bearing in here. Okay. You want to oil that bearing. Then we can put that cover back on. This is your spool adjuster. You tighten it or loosen it to control the tempo of the speed of the spool. All right, one more visual check says that we need our two yoke springs, which I usually forget. One on each post. And we can take our side plate, put that on. And when you put it on, make sure you get a nice snap and a nice tight side plate. And then we know that the 4 screws are all the same. So it doesn't matter which screw hole they go in. Go high and low, kind of north, south, east, west on this. And while I'm doing that, if you have any questions on this reel or any reel, maybe you're working on one and you're stuck, maybe you're like Lyle, I just had one apart to service and something didn't go right. Whatever your questions are, if you leave them in the comments section, I do try to answer those. And generally speaking, I try to answer them the next day in the morning. So if you happen to be asking a question at the dinner hour, if you will, don't expect me to answer that question until about 10 a.m. the following morning. We have a bearing on this side of the spool. I'm going to oil that up. These are shielded bearings. We should have a bearing in the case here. We do. We'll put some oil in there as well. I don't grease the shafts, I oil them and insert the spool and bring the cover over and press in. And then we have the screw cap here to close. Okay, one more thing here, just to check. I think we'll be fine. I'm going to just put a little bit of oil onto your worm shaft here. Let's go rebuild this side then. We had the heavy washer goes below. We had the 2 tension washers next. They got bellies on them, so I put belly up on the first, belly down on the second. Then we have that drag adjuster nut, and you want that groove facing up, not down like we found it. Bring that all the way in. Tighten that down as much as you can. It'll make it easier to set the star adjuster. Alright, now we take that little ring out of there. I think this is probably the time this cloth has got to come off, because I'm going to be working with that little spring and stud noisemaker. And I'm going to just spill that into my parts tray here, because these things have a tendency to just kind of travel. Alright, first thing we want to do with this, there's a square in here and a square in here. Just bring it over. Oops, that was an oops. I put the spring in first. And just sit that here, kind of hold it tight. Part 1. Next up is that little spring. This one's going to be tough for me to do because my fingers are big, these parts are small. I'm going to use a little micro pliers here to see if I can't do it this way. That goes in. Boy, these are about as small as you can get. And if you lose it, well, you're out of luck. Okay, that's the way that that piece sits right in here. Now you want the dimpled side, this one with the ring, to go on next. Holding everything tight. By now your hands are probably getting fatigued. The handle goes on. And then the handle nut goes on. And you need to be careful with these. You need to make sure that it goes on nice and easy like this. If you're struggling with this, then you probably got it cross-stripped. Alright, let's tighten down. You can hear the clickers working, so we've got that installed properly. And tighten down your handle. Let's see if we can get this, because this cap now, cap's a little bit unusual. It has a stud on the one side to go into one hole, and it has the screw on the other, so look for the plain side here for the stud. See how we did. And we're not quite lined up there. This will be trial and error. Only second shot, not bad. Okay, let's see if we can get the screw in now. We should be able to because the one side's holding it. There you go. All right. Well, I followed the schematics here. I didn't know this reel quite as much as I do some others. I wanted to make sure that we were okay and we kind of found where the issue was. We started by checking out the spool. That seemed to ride fine. We checked out the free spool release. That worked. So we said it's localized to the gear side. And when we worked on the gear side, we found a couple of things. The spring was not installed here. That washer was upside down. This nut was upside down for the spring. We're not quite sure whether the studs were in the main gear or not. We came over to the anti-reverse assembly and found out that the anti-reverse dog was not installed correctly either. Let's see how we did. All right, first thing we want to do is go right back to where we were. Let's trip down the free spool. Nice and quiet. We've oiled those bearings. Nice and quiet. Spins beautifully. Turn. Locks it in. Well, no noise. We've got this one fishing again. Lyle, you're ready to go. I hope you've enjoyed that. It's always fun to kind of do the diagnosis, identify the issues, and well, just try to give the reels a second chance, keep them fishing. So lessons learned. Take pictures as you go along. Don't be afraid to utilize the schematics. They tell you where the parts belong and the orientation of those pieces and parts, like that nut that was upside down. And well, it's a general aid even before you start taking the reel apart, just to understand where those what you're looking at in terms of a structure of the reel, so that when you get in there you have a little bit more confidence. I hope you've enjoyed it. I want to take a moment to thank our police, fire, safety, rescue, EMTs, all public safety workers and everything it is that they do on our behalf. I want to take a moment to thank you, the viewer, for making this channel what it is. And for those of you that have subscribed, thank you. And if you haven't subscribed, again, I want to recommend that you do subscribe to the channel. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, wishing everybody a great day.